Thank you and good morning, everyone. Can I just say what a pleasure it is to be here after such amazing speakers in the morning. So I hope I can carry on that tradition after the coffee break. So anyone who's seen the title of my presentation will probably be wondering what it's talking about. So just to give a quick introduction to Accounting for Sustainability, it was set up over 10 years ago by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who was convinced by his then principal private secretary, who was essentially the CEO of the Prince's household, that it was accountants that were going to save the world. And that gentleman was Sir Michael Peat, who is the P in KPMG. So he came from a long line of accountants, and he was fully convinced that accountants were the ones who were going to make the difference and save the world. So just to give a little explanation to the title of my presentation. In Accounting for Sustainability, we work through our networks around three main objectives. It's to inspire finance leaders, it's to transform business practices within finance, and then it's to scale up. So how do we go about trying to make those three huge missions happen? We work through two main networks. Our accounting bodies network, where we work with a group of accounting bodies so that we can reach 2/3 of the world's accountants with our messages, and they commit to embedding sustainability within their syllabuses. We also have a CFO leadership network, so we work with CFOs of the 16 leading organisations across Europe, ranging from Adidas, Siemens, Yorkshire Water, Southwest Water, and various others. And each of those different CFOs commit personally to sustainability and also making sure that their organisations implement sustainable practices within their business. So that's how we do our work. I just wanted to start with a quick question. So we've all had our coffee break, so hopefully everyone's a little bit enlivened. And just a really quick question, so don't overthink it, just instinctively. Do you think accountants have an important role to play in making nature count? So just a show of hands for those who think yes. Wow. Those who think no. Also, I saw one hand in the air and not sure, so that anyone's sitting on the fence. So a couple on the fence, okay. So I'm actually going to have a really easy job, I think, today, if everyone already thinks that accountants have a really important role to play. Not too much convincing, but I will still continue and talk around this very important subject. So I wanted to start with a concept that a lot of people immediately think that when you talk about accounting and when we talk about traditional accounting, we're talking about monetary values and putting a financial value on something. But when we're actually talking about accounting for sustainability within my organisation, we're talking around these three different areas. So identification, what is significant and material to an organisation around natural capital and broader societal impacts. Then you go through to the quantification, so as we heard this morning, putting a value on something, how do you measure it? And then you talk about potential monetisation, so not everything needs to be monetised. So when we're talking about accounting, this is kind of how we're thinking about that terminology. The role of finance. So within organisations, quite often the finance function is seen as the gatekeeper, the people who say yes or no to things, those people who say you can and can't do something or there is not enough money to do something. But when we're thinking about natural capital, they also have these 5 bigger roles within an organisation that we need to think about, and how do we engage them on natural capital. So the first one is identification of issues. So quite often the finance function is responsible for those types of things like thresholds. So if something goes over a certain threshold, then it then needs to be managed, a programme needs to be put in place. And that's where the finance function is involved, around the risk management, identification of risks and opportunities. Also very involved, as everyone would expect, is in the robustness of information. So how accurate is that information? How complete is it? How consistent? Can we make decisions based on that information? They also generally hold processes within an organisation, so all the different processes that go on, from how you pay suppliers to how you look at your capital investment processes, to how you report things. Finance generally control all of those processes, so they're incredibly important in integrating all of the things that we've been talking about this morning into how businesses operate. They're also obviously very interested in controls. They like to make sure that things are right and accurate and that we're not relying on things that we shouldn't be. They're also heavily involved in target development. So the finance function is involved in setting strategy, determining what those outcomes should be, what should the KPIs be, what is an achievable target, or in certain businesses, what kind of target do we want to set so that we actually transform how we do things. So that's just a small flavour of some of the things that finance does and how it touches or should touch natural capital. So now a little survey. So I've talked about the role of finance, but how do they see their role within sustainability? So we did a survey late last year with our membership. So we're already quite a self-selecting audience, that they're already quite engaged in sustainability. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at this. But thankfully, over 80% said that finance has an important role to play in building long-term, resilient business models. But then on the flip side, if you look at how engaged they actually are in making that happen, there was less consensus within the survey, with only 15% saying that finance is highly engaged. So there's still a lot of work for my organisation to do around engaging finance. A survey that we did a couple of years ago now, but I think the results are still relevant, and I haven't seen a significant shift in things that would suggest that this might have changed, unfortunately. So with the Chartered Global Management Accountants, they asked their membership whether they include environmental and social factors when providing information and analysis to decision makers. So that's the important piece to decision makers. So they might report this information, but not necessarily to decision makers, and less than half said that they actually report it at the moment. So it's quite a small number of these factors being put within business and in front of decision makers. So again, lots more work to do. A more positive finding from the survey was the increased number of students who were more committed. So they were asked whether they agreed whether it was their responsibility as management accountants to integrate environmental and social information into their work. And nearly 80% of the students felt that it was their responsibility to start looking at these things. So as a profession, it is starting to change, and we're seeing that shift, especially within the younger generation. So I'm now going to try and attempt to show you a video. So I mentioned previously around our CFO Leadership Network, so I thought it would be quite interesting for you to hear from one of our CFOs talk about their aspect around sustainability. So the CFO that we're going to show here is the former CFO of Sainsbury's. He is now the CEO of Home Retail Group following their acquisition. So just a couple-minute presentation to see his perspective on the accounting profession and sustainability. So Hannah showed me how to do this. So hopefully, yes. Oh, and it worked.
I think it's really important that sustainability and financial decision making go hand in hand. A lot of people think that sustainability isn't necessarily underpinned by commercial viability. There's a lot of skeptics out there, and the reality is actually there's lots of commercial decision making that involves sustainability that make absolute sense. I mean, we as an organisation, for example, invest £50 million a year in sustainability initiatives, and I can absolutely guarantee you that every single penny of that money has commercial viability underpinning it. Well, I think CFOs need to take a leading role. It's not just CFOs, of course, and we all need to take responsibility for promoting sustainability, but I think CFOs are particularly important in most organisations because, of course, they hold the purse strings. They are absolutely at the centre of the capital investment decision-making process. So if we can get CFOs thinking about sustainability, thinking about how that sustainability should be incorporated into taking the right decisions for businesses, then I think that's a really powerful first step. I think collaboration between CFOs on this issue is really important because it gives us the opportunity to share ideas, to challenge each other, to really test how sustainability can be interwoven into commercial decision making in the business. The fact that there's a peer group of people together, challenging, sharing, talking about this issue, I think is very important so that the word can then be spread amongst the broader finance community.
A couple of words from one of our CFOs and a little plug for our organisation at the end there that you probably saw. So let's see if I can go back. So play from current slide. Excellent, I think. It worked. Okay, so we had the video. So I think hopefully from what you've seen from the first part of my presentation is that finance and sustainability are highly linked within organisations, or should be more linked within organisations. There are commercial benefits, there are business benefits from taking these things into account, but why isn't it happening? So through our CFO Leadership Network, each year we run a number of projects and we work with the finance teams within all of the different organisations. And these are just some of the common challenges that are always thrown up by finance teams when they say that they're trying to integrate sustainability within their decision making. So I think the common one, which isn't specific just to finance or accounting, is that they're too stretched. There's too many other things going on, so why do we need to start looking at this new area now? And quite often a good way to overcome that is starting with something specific, small, a pilot project that can prove the business case and that can then be scaled up. That seems to be how a lot of businesses start these things and then scale up. Is this too hard to do? So I think with the language dictionary, it shows how many different terms there are out there and how confusing it can get, when actually you just need to talk about energy, water, land, and people automatically get it. You don't need to think about conversion factors or the different elements that you need to take into account. You have specialists who look at that for you. Next one, obviously, senior management, are they bought in? I don't see them being bought in. They just want to focus on the core financials. So it's very important to get the CFO bought in, and then also the bottom-up approach. So as I showed, the students are very engaged on this topic. So how can you squeeze out that middle layer that can sometimes stop things by using the CFOs and using the students to start to drive that change? Another common one, as accountants, we like things to be wholly accurate. We're not very comfortable with assumptions or big plus or minuses and intervals. So how do we work around data quality? So I think the move with the natural capital protocol and all of the work that is going on there will help to address one of these common challenges. There's still more work to do, as you would expect. Natural capital has not been around as long as financial, so there is something there that needs to happen. And another challenge that often comes up is around they don't see how they can impact sustainability. So it's being clear about the role of finance within sustainability and how it touches all the different parts of the business and their role within it. And then also reward schemes. So within our CFO Leadership Network, a lot of the organisations have incentives within their bonus structure for sustainability targets, and that really helps to drive change. So on the flip side of the challenges is all of the opportunities that are out there. So you'll see my language is slightly different to Gary's language this morning around economics, so much more the financial basis. Strengthen decision making. So how do you use natural capital within your decision making? So Sainsbury's, as you saw, was one of our leadership network. Within their Greenest Grocer programme, they were looking at energy savings within stores, and the finance team and the energy team worked together to develop a simple report that allowed them to show cost savings, energy savings, carbon savings for each of their different investments that then goes to their investment appraisal board for them to say yes or no to certain investments. And just a simple report by combining all of those different metrics means that they have strengthened decision making and they can start to implement things on a more consistent basis and systematic basis. Another common opportunity from looking at natural capital and sustainability in a broader context is enhanced risk management and reducing cost. So National Grid, I think someone asked a question this morning around infrastructure. So National Grid, very bought into sustainability and completely understand that reduced wastage and reduced energy is essentially saved costs. So when they were looking at an upgrade to the wire system within London, they looked at it through a sustainability lens, and through reducing the size of the tunnels that they were going to use, actually managed to save £3 million upfront in cost savings and obviously associated energy and carbon savings as well. It can also help organisations identify business opportunities, revenues and customers. So one of our other organisations is DSM, who work in health, nutrition and chemicals. And one of their projects is around Eco Plus. So they developed their own methodology for looking at all of their product portfolio through an Eco Plus lens. So looking at the whole life cycle of their products and their environmental impacts and dependencies, and assigning whether those products were Eco Plus or not. And as a result of that program, they now have 95% of their innovation pipeline is Eco Plus products, and 45% of their ongoing sales is from Eco Plus products. So it's starting to change that shift within how they do their business. And then improved reputation. So I think all of the CFO Leadership Network organisations that we work with all have an improved reputation. Their ability to talk to customers, to suppliers, to investors around sustainability issues by using financial metrics really helps to change that conversation and that dialogue. So I think this was touched on this morning, and I just kind of wanted to highlight it again, to monetise or not to monetise. So quite often within accounting, there is a tendency to want to put a financial metric and number on it to be able to determine those trade-offs and interdependencies, I think is one of the main benefits of it. But within our CFO leadership network, so 16 CFOs, there is not a consensus around monetisation. So some see that you have to monetise it to be able to inform decision making. Others feel that you don't need to monetise it to actually make decisions, that you have enough information already to be able to make those decisions without having to put a monetary value on it. So some practical examples around different elements of what organisations are doing. So I mentioned the incentivisation one. So one of the key things to drive change and to make people take these things into account is putting it within the reward structure of an organisation. So making sure that you have targets for key members within an organisation and within key functions. Investing, so around your capital investment appraisal process. So when you're determining whether you should make those big capital investments, making sure that natural capital is there up front within that process, and then engaging, how you engage with your investors, your wider stakeholders, either through quantitative or qualitative metrics to determine your impact and dependencies, and then it's all about embedding it. So coming up with those pilots and then scaling it up. So using the M&S approach, who very much trial something, work out what worked well, what didn't, and then scale it up, and how finance can input to that process, so help develop the business case, make sure that funding is available, making sure the metrics are collected in that pilot process to determine the business case and what are the benefits and impacts, and then putting that through to scale up, so all the cost savings that can be achieved. So those were the final couple of things. I was going to do the question again, but I think given my amazing output from the first question, I'm a little nervous about doing it again. So I'm going to skip over it, and we're going to go straight to questions. Well, I have a nice quote from one of our CFOs from British Land, who talks around the move beyond financial metrics. Thanks very much, Kathryn. So I'm sure there are questions from the floor, Kathryn.
Hi, Matt Smith from the Joint Nature Conservation Committee in the UK. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think A4S does some really commendable work. It was a very quick question, really, to echo some of what Tony was saying earlier about understanding, obviously, accounting for stocks, but harder to actually quantify the flows of the benefits. I was wondering, in terms of your stakeholders, how much does kind of nature, biodiversity, wildlife, or indeed nature-based solutions really feature in your discussions outside of the kind of the quantifying of natural capital stocks within your balance sheets?
So, very good question. Thank you. The discussions we have with the finance community very much are based on the type of organisation. So those types of organisations that have the biggest impact and dependency on natural capital is where those discussions have moved further, and the quantification piece is moving along much further and more holistically. I would say the broader context and the societal benefits within organisations, I would actually say it's flipped from what Gary was saying this morning around natural capital for policymakers being less advanced. I would say for organisations, natural capital accounting and looking at natural capital is more advanced than social capital for organisations and businesses, if that answers the question. Kind of.
Hi, it's Pádraig Fogarty from the Irish Wildlife Trust. I'm just wondering, what are the risks that you see for greenwashing in all of this? We see a lot of this in Ireland, where we get companies telling us how wonderful they think they're doing and all the benefits they're producing for the natural environment, but we find then that actually the actions are quite shallow and very little, and it's really just business as usual, and it's more of a marketing fig leaf.
Yeah, so I mean, there'll always be a risk of greenwash, and that's very much the different types of organisations that you work with. The organisations we work with, it's very much around transforming and inputting to decision making. I think the risk of greenwash is much more for organisations who have their sustainability function within the corporate comms team. It's quite often a bit of an indicator of where there might be a risk of greenwash, and also that they're not actually using the information that they're collating. They're just putting it out there, putting a nice brand on it, and that's it. If you can start to find those examples of where they're using it in decision making, where they're integrating it into their processes, where it's actually driving change, then I think there is less risk of greenwash. And also that balanced approach. So I don't think anyone in the audience has the answer that we're all looking for, but collectively we should be starting to get towards that answer. And it's those organisations that put out there, you know, we have challenges in this area, we haven't got it right, but this is our approach, this is what we're thinking about, and we'd welcome others to come on that journey with us. It's so quiet when the microphone's moving.
Okay, I'll make it louder. Can I just ask a question about the term sustainability? Because I thought it was a great talk, but there seems to be, the two seem to be, natural capital and sustainability seem to be merging into one. And if Dieter were here, he would be saying absolutely they're not. And so, what I'm interested in is how's that being played out across your CEOs and that sort of level of management?
So I was very conscious of using the word sustainability today, and I was trying to deliberately use sustainability and not natural capital, because obviously they're not equal, and you're not trying to look at that. So when we talk about sustainability, it's environmental and social, and obviously natural capital fits within the environmental piece. But I also don't think you should look at one capital in isolation. You should be looking at the broad set of capitals within decision making, and that's how we talk about it with CFOs. So it's not trying to get everything right on natural capital, leave all the others to one side, and then we'll start working on those. It's how do you look at the full suite.
So maybe it's a conversation, but how do you then give guidance on sustainability? I mean, what framework is used in that sense, sort of to say, okay, this is how you can increase your sustainability? You know, I think of it, are you recommending they use it FSC, or what sort of products, I suppose?
Yeah, so we don't normally make recommendations. We work through the project teams. So each year we set up different project teams with the CFOs and all their different organisations from their finance teams, and we look at a particular function or process within finance, and how do you integrate sustainability within that process, regardless of sector, regardless of organisation, regardless of location. So it's quite high level guidance, and then we work on that basis so that the recommendation, the guidance that we come up with is from the project team, from the organisations, based on their experience and insights, and a way to share what they've learned as they've gone through that process.
Thank you very much, Kathryn.
Thank you.
So we'll leave the questions there.